Everyone is talking about artificial intelligence stocks. Your neighbor is buying Nvidia. The taxi driver is buying quantum computing funds. Your dentist just told you he made 40% in 3 months on semiconductor companies. At the office, they whisper about the new technological revolution like it's a secret only they discovered. They feel smart. They feel early. They check their portfolios during lunch and smile at numbers that only go up. And you, sitting there, you wonder if you're the fool for not joining them. Let me tell you what I see. I don't see opportunity. I see a trap. I see history repeating itself with such precision it would be comedic if it weren't about to hurt so many people. I see intelligent people making the same mistake humans have made for 400 years, dressed up in new clothing, wrapped in new language, but rotten with the same core delusion, the belief that this time is different. The belief that valuation doesn't matter when the story is compelling enough. I'm 99 years old. I've watched this play 7 times in my adult life. 7 distinct manias, each one convinced it had discovered something that made the old rules obsolete. The old rules never became obsolete. The people who ignored them did. Let me tell you about a man I knew. His name was Richard Hathaway. Not his real name, but close enough that if he were still alive, he'd recognize himself. This was 1999. Richard was a cardiologist. Brilliant man, saved lives weekly, made $400,000 a year, which in those days meant something. He had a wife, 3 children, a paid-off house in Pasadena, and a retirement account worth $1.2 million. He was, by any reasonable measure, winning at life. Then he discovered the internet. Not the internet itself. He'd been using email for years. He discovered internet stocks. He went to a dinner party, and a software engineer told him about a company that was going to revolutionize pet food delivery. Another company was going to make all bookstores obsolete. Another was going to replace every travel agent in America. The engineer had made $150,000 in 6 months. Richard, who spent a decade in medical school and another decade building his practice, had never made that kind of money that fast. Something happened to him that night. I know because his wife told me later. He came home and couldn't sleep. He opened his laptop at 2 in the morning and started reading. He discovered message boards where anonymous people with usernames like Tech Guru and Millionaire by 2000 shared stock tips. He discovered that the rules he'd always heard, the boring rules about price-to-earnings ratios and profit margins, were being called obsolete by very confident people. This was a new economy. This was a paradigm shift. Valuation metrics from the industrial age didn't apply to companies growing at internet speed. He started small. He took $50,000 from his retirement account and bought shares in 5 internet companies. Within 3 weeks, he was up 30%. $15,000. For doing nothing, for simply being smart enough to recognize the future. He told his colleagues at the hospital. Some of them mocked him, called him a gambler. But one of them, a younger surgeon, asked for the names of the companies. Richard felt a pride he hadn't felt since his first successful surgery. He was teaching someone. He was ahead of the curve. He bought more. He took another $100,000 from his retirement account, then another 100. His wife asked questions. He showed her the statements. They were up 60% now. She stopped asking questions. By the summer of 1999, Richard had moved $400,000, 1/3 of his retirement money, into internet stocks. He was up 90%. He'd made $360,000 in 7 months, more than he made saving lives in a year. He started spending time on the message boards during his lunch breaks. He'd eat a sandwich with one hand and refresh stock quotes with the other. He stopped reading medical journals. He started reading analyst reports from 25-year-olds at investment banks who'd never run a business but had very strong opinions about which companies would dominate the 21st century. Then something shifted in his psychology. This is the part his wife told me about years later, and she cried when she said it. He became afraid, not afraid of losing money, afraid of missing out on more. He'd see a stock he didn't own go up 30% in a day and feel physical pain. Actual chest pain, which as a cardiologist he knew wasn't cardiac, but he felt it anyway. The pain of opportunity lost. The pain of being less rich than he could have been. He convinced himself that the only risky position was having too little exposure. Cash was dangerous. Cash just sat there losing to inflation, while the new economy minted millionaires daily. In December of 1999, Richard did something his wife discovered only when the brokerage statement arrived. He took a margin loan. He borrowed against his portfolio to buy more stocks. He now had $600,000 invested on $400,000 of actual money. He owed the brokerage $200,000, but that was fine because his positions were up so much the interest was irrelevant. For 3 more months, he felt like a genius. Then March 2000 arrived. His portfolio started declining. Not crashing, just declining. Down 5% one week, down another 4% the next. He told himself it was healthy profit-taking. He'd read that phrase on a message board and it sounded intelligent, but the decline continued. April, May, June. By July, his portfolio was down 40% from its peak. He was now underwater on his margin loan. The brokerage sent him a notice. He needed to deposit more cash, or they'd sell his positions. He took a home equity loan, $60,000 against the house he'd paid off. The house that was supposed to be the untouchable foundation of his family's security. He deposited the money and held his positions. The stocks kept falling. By the end of 2000, his portfolio was down 70%. The $400,000 he'd invested was now worth $120,000, but he still owed $200,000 on margin plus the $60,000 home equity loan. He'd managed to turn $400,000 in savings into $140,000 whole. His wife found out when the bank called about missed payments on the equity loan. I visited Richard once after that. This was 2002. He'd picked up extra shifts. He was working 70 hours a week at age 56 to rebuild what he'd destroyed. He looked a decade older than his age. He said something I've never forgotten. He said, "I thought I was investing in the future. I was just gambling on adjectives. Revolutionary, disruptive, transformative. I bought adjectives, and I paid noun prices." Richard isn't unique. Richard is the rule. Every mania produces 10 million Richards. The details change. The names change. In the 1920s, it was radio stocks and utility holding companies. In the 50s, it was uranium. In the 60s, it was conglomerates. In the 70s, it was the Nifty 50 growth stocks. In the 80s, it was junk bonds and Japanese real estate. In the 90s, it was dot-coms. In the 2000s, it was subprime mortgage securities. In the 2010s, it was cryptocurrency. Today, it's artificial intelligence. Pattern never changes. A real technological advancement occurs. The advancement is genuine. Radio was real. The internet was real. Artificial intelligence is real. But then speculation divorced from valuation inflates the genuine into the grotesque. Companies with no profits trade at billion-dollar valuations because they have the magic words in their business description. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, the adjectives again, and intelligent people, people like Richard, people like your neighbor and your dentist and maybe you, convince themselves that this time the old rules don't apply because this time the technology is truly revolutionary. Let me tell you the truth. The technology is revolutionary. The stock prices are not. Those are two separate things. You can believe completely in the transformative power of artificial intelligence and simultaneously believe that paying 60 times sales for an unprofitable company is insane. Those beliefs are not contradictory. They're both obviously true. Here is what happens in every mania. The early investors make money. They were genuinely early. They took a real risk on an uncertain outcome and they got rewarded. Good for them. Then other people see those returns and want them. But they're not early anymore. They're middle. The early investors start selling to the middle investors at higher prices. The middle investors make some money too because there are late investors coming behind them. The late investors are buying adjectives at noun prices from people who bought nouns at verb prices. Then the latest investors arrive. They're buying purely on momentum. They don't understand the technology. They don't care about the business model. They just know the line goes up. They're buying from the late investors who are desperate to sell before the music stops. Then one day, and it's always sudden, there are no more latest investors. Everyone who is going to buy has bought. The last fool has entered the market. Prices hang there for a moment, suspended by nothing but the absence of selling. Then someone sells. Then someone else, then someone else sells. Then everyone sells. The price collapses not because the technology stopped being revolutionary, but because there's no one left to buy adjectives at those prices. And here is the cruel part. The part that makes this a moral story and not just a financial one. The early investors, the ones who made money, they're fine. The middle investors, some make money, some lose money. They mostly survive. The late and latest investors, the Richards of the world, they get destroyed. And who are the late investors? They're not venture capitalists. They're not sophisticated hedge funds. They're dentists and doctors and teachers and engineers. They're people with real jobs and real savings who got convinced that they were missing out on history. The wealth transfer in every mania flows from the unsophisticated to the sophisticated, from the late to the early, from the hopeful to the cynical. It's a machine that turns middle-class savings into upper-class windfalls, and it runs on envy. That's the psychology. That's what Richard had. That's what your neighbor has. That's what you're fighting if you feel the pull right now. It's not greed exactly. Greed is wanting more. This is worse. This is envy. This is seeing someone else get rich and feeling like their gain is your loss. Feeling like you're being left behind. Feeling stupid for being cautious. That feeling is more powerful than greed because it comes with social pain. Your neighbor brags about his returns. Your colleague calls you risk-averse, like it's an insult. The message boards and the social media and the financial news, they're all designed to trigger that feeling, to make you feel late, to make you feel like everyone else knows something you don't. And the only cure for that pain is action. Buy something. Buy anything. Just stop being on the sidelines. Here's what I learned in 75 years of watching this. The sidelines are where the money is made, not made actively, made passively through not losing it in manias. If you have $100,000 and you don't lose it in a mania, you're ahead of 90% of the people who tried to get rich in that mania, because they turned 100,000 into 60,000 and you still have 100,000. You won by doing nothing. This is almost impossible for humans to accept. We're wired to act. We're wired to believe that superior results require superior action. But in investing, superior results usually come from avoiding inferior action, from not being Richard, from not buying adjectives at noun prices, from not convincing yourself that this time is different. You want to know how to get rich? I'll tell you, it's boring. It's so boring that when I tell you, you'll feel disappointed. You'll feel like I'm hiding the real secret. I'm not. This is the secret. Buy pieces of good businesses at reasonable prices and hold them for decades. That's it. Good businesses means they make products people need and they make profits doing it. Reasonable prices means you're not paying 50 or 60 or 70 times earnings. Decades means you ignore the news. You ignore the manias. You ignore your neighbor. You sit there like a tree and let compounding do the work. If you do that, if you simply do that, you'll be rich. Not next month. Not next year. but in 20 or 30 years, you'll be rich. And the Richards of the world will still be working extra shifts trying to rebuild what they gambled away chasing adjectives. The news will tell you this is obsolete advice. The news makes money from your activity, from your clicking and trading and feeling anxious. Calm investors don't generate advertising revenue. The message boards will tell you this is boomer thinking. That I don't understand the new paradigm. I understand paradigms fine. I understand that the word paradigm is what people use when they want to sound intelligent while ignoring fundamentals. The fundamentals don't change. A business is worth the cash it will generate for its owners over its lifetime, discounted back to the present. That's not a paradigm, that's mathematics. You can't disrupt mathematics. You can ignore it. You can pretend it doesn't apply to you. But it applies. It always applies. So when you see the news next week, and they're breathless about some artificial intelligence company that went up 40% in 3 days, remember Richard Hathaway. Remember that he was smart. Remember that he had every advantage. Remember that he destroyed a decade of disciplined savings in 18 months of mania. Remember that the early investors already made their money. Remember that you're being offered the privilege of buying high. Remember that adjectives are not assets. Remember that revolutionary technology and overpriced stocks are two different things. Remember that the sidelines are where the money is made. Remember that boring wins. Remember that the market rewards patience and punishes excitement. You don't need artificial intelligence stocks to get rich. You need character. You need the character to ignore your neighbor, to ignore the news, to ignore the feeling that you're missing out. You're not missing out. You're avoiding the trap. That's not passivity. That's wisdom. The trap is set. It's baited with real technology and fake urgency. Most people will walk into it. You don't have to. Choose wisely.